The Meg. I know, what a name for a film. And I know what you're thinking. How on earth is this film going to be any good? Well, it may surprise you. Going into The Meg, I wasn't expecting much. But coming out, I was actually pleasantly surprised. Look, it isn't a great film by any means, but there is fun to be found here. It wasn't as over the top and ridiculous as much as the trailer made it out to be, and considering the subject matter of a 70-foot megalodon shark, it's very respectful with its violence and gore, which makes it suitable for most audiences. Jason Statham headlines this blockbuster, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this film was so popular worldwide it went on to make a ludicrous amount of money. I remember reading the mind-boggling numbers, and all I can say to that is fair play. I love these monster shark films as much as the next guy. I'd be watching loads of them if they were released more often. Last one that came out I think was The Shallows, which I really liked. So let's hope the star power of Statham and the Meg's high numbers contribute to allow more films like this to be made much more frequently. Right then, on to The Meg itself. The film starts off with a brief section introducing us to what Jonas, Statham's character, does for a living. He's the expert when it comes to deep sea rescue operations, and as this rescue was fully underway, Jonas was absolutely sure something, and something big at that, dented that submarine whilst he and his team were there inside. He had to make a snap decision: leave now and rescue those already on board, including Dr. Heller, or try to rescue them all. His choice would go on to haunt him, even if it proved to be the right one. If he had stayed, everyone would have been killed, so jump forth 5 years later into the present day at the Manawan Research Centre. We would soon find out that Jonas's skills will be needed again if he could once more brave the depths of the ocean. I really liked the opening 30 minutes or so, I really did. The writers clearly went for a more scientific approach as to how a megalodon could survive in today's climate. What everyone thought was the bottom of the ocean was actually a layer of hydrogen sulfide creating a thick cloud of gas. This cloud essentially split off the ecosystems of the ocean, and at that depth anything could be living down there. And that is where our megalodon comes from, and surprise surprise, it was attracted to the light. Who knew? Our explorers really should have cottoned on quicker to that fact instead of being bashed around all of the time. But as they are stranded and stuck deep down at the bottom of the new ocean floor, 11,000 feet down nonetheless, only one person alive today had that kind of experience, so it was time to send him down there. Cliff Curtis is an always welcome addition to the cast, and with his aid, along with the rest of the others at the research facility, they would all try their utmost to help Jonas save those trapped by the Meg. At this point though, no one actually knew they were up against a giant prehistoric shark. It was only when Su Yin was about to be crushed by the giant squid, then it made its grand appearance. There was no waiting around like we did in Jaws, and no brief glances. Once the Meg was revealed, the screenwriters were not afraid to show off their main attraction. Fair play once again though, it actually looks pretty good. For a big budget film to throw so much money behind the CGI is a surprise to me, but considering the amount of money the film went on to make, you can't say it was the wrong decision. Anyhow, after Jonas was successful in his rescue, we found out that it wasn't without consequence. Aside from Toshi losing his life, the explosion caused a gateway to open, which allowed the Meg to follow them through the cloud. Which did allow us for this scene, which is the best scene in the film. Awesome imagery and a really good scene. Now that meant the Meg was free from its confinements. Not good considering the location the facility was at. And not long after being freed into the open ends of the ocean, boats were going down, sailors were being dismembered, and the only way to find the damn thing was to listen to the screams and follow the distress calls. Oh, about that. Let's put a tracker on the giant man-eating shark. Genius. Only volunteers are not exactly at a premium, and I do not care whatever the situation. Jonas is a lunatic for going ahead with that plan. Sure, it made for a silly albeit cool chase section, but no one in their right minds would ever agree to that. I'd be off a million miles in the other direction if he asked that of me. No sirree Bob. And those sorts of ideas just kept on coming. Soo-yin took into getting into an indestructible shark tank to jab poison into this terror from the depths, but again, although smarter than before because you have some sort of protection, it still wasn't the brightest of ideas. However, because cinema, it worked, which then led into the most obvious reveal in the world that there was a second shark. I knew as soon as the whale was frolicking about in the water he was about to be a goner, and he was swallowed whole, and more deaths followed as this megalodon, the original one that bit into the glass facility, was ready to wreak havoc on anything in its path. And what was its next destination? Just one of the most densely populated beaches you will ever come across. Lol, this should be good. Our team were forced to regroup and quickly embark to the beaches in order to save as many lives as possible. And when it came down to it, it was man versus Meg. Jonas versus the Megalodon. And this winner was an easy one to pick. Who's your money on? One measly 70-foot shark with razor-sharp teeth? Or a man we know as Jason Statham? You'd have been a fool to bet against him. And as he drove that metal pipe into the Meg's eye, nature had rebalanced itself as the biggest shark in history was back on the extinction list. It was ridiculous, but it was, albeit, entertaining. I'll give it that. My overall verdict for The Meg is a 6 out of 10. Slightly harsh perhaps, I could have possibly bumped this up to a 7, but I felt that The Shallows, which I gave a 7 when I reviewed it, is superior to this film. Doesn't mean to say it's a bad film, certainly not, at least not for me. A popcorn flick that was enjoyable. Yes, it's silly with some crazy scenes thrown in, so it may not be for everyone, but again, I am a fan of these monster horror films, and I always have been. However, I do have a few gripes. The acting in general is pretty mediocre. There are no real standouts here, and the shark's proportions do seem to vary all of the time. It was a bit jarring, especially when they had that first one strung up on that ship, to see one moment the size of it next to Jonas and Soo-yin in the water, then it being barely like half the size of that a moment later. And how did the Meg even attack Jonas at the beginning 5 years before anyone ever discovered that you could go beneath that hydrogen cloud of gas? Who knows? Some of the characters are also very hit and miss. Rainn Wilson's billionaire Morris being the main one. Shows up, seems like a cool guy, suddenly becomes corporate arsehole upon seeing the riches of this unexplored ecosystem, goes back to being alright and even saves Jax's life, then goes back to being a corporate arsehole again and dies in his own web of lies. Can't say I am sorry for him. Ruby Rose's Jax was a character that I felt was okay. She was never really utilised or given a substantial part. Those roles were more so given to Soo-yin and her father Zhang. The initial anger from Soo-yin towards Jonas was unwarranted, but I will admit I did chuckle a number of times as the romance and fire between them began to spread. Mac grinning and winding up Jonas was amusing, and even though this film has its fair share of laughs, it also wasn't afraid of going to the other end of the spectrum. We grieved on more than a few occasions in the film. Zhang's death, Toshi, the doc, and even that little doggy which was thankfully alive at the end. Too small to be eaten or even noticed, one would assume there. And considering the rating for the film and it being family friendly, the film did fare well, especially in certain scenes like that beach attack. No one was being ripped in half a la Deep Blue Sea style, because it would have been a whole other ballgame if they went in that direction, I tell ya. The Meg to me was a fun watch. Statham's macho style fared fine for him in this film, and I'll be honest, I don't really go out of my way to watch many of his films. I like him in The Expendables, but that's about as much as I've seen him in before. But here, I was a fan of his. I like the film, and I would watch it again. But again, it depends on your limits of monster horror flicks, because this one just might stretch beyond some people's limits. So what do you all think of The Meg? Like it, love it, or do you straight up dislike the film? Everyone has their own opinions, so do not fret and let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Please leave a like, comment and subscribe if you enjoyed the review, and I'll see you on the next one.
Oh yeah, jellyfish!